Okay, today we're going to talk about some of the tools that we'd be using to install drywall, or is what we call in the field, drywall hangers. That's what we're doing. We're hanging drywall, whether it's on a wall or on a lid. That board is always going to be hanging. We'll talk about those tools, some of the disadvantages and advantages, the safety features, what we have to figure out as far as keeping ourselves safe, keeping everyone else around us safe. And also, I will demonstrate the techniques, and we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it, and hopefully I could give you some insight on how to be good quality drywall hanger as well as speed and being productive. Okay, so the first basic tool that we're going to use is the knife, right? We got to cut the drywall. We have to use a board knife. Now, just like every tool out there, there's a lot of different kinds. You have your retractable blades, you got your fixed blades, but the one important thing is the blade itself. Now, the blades have to have 2 little notches in it, okay? A lot of blades only come with 1 notch in there. So if you buy that 1 notch, it's going to limit how accurate you're going to be when you're cutting. Now, when you have the 2 notches on your blade, what it allows you to do is to expose more of your blade. You're able to go ahead and expose more of it. The tip's going to extend out further. So when you're cutting, you're going to be able to go ahead and use your tape measure to go ahead and get a really good accurate line and be able to sink that blade far enough where it's going to provide a nice clean cut for the drywall. The retractables really don't offer that. The retractables hardly stick out and doesn't allow for a good proper grabbing of your tape measure. So that being said, one thing that we need with our blade to be able to cut the drywall is our tape measure. Now they got a lot of different styles, a lot of different sizes. They talk about the Stanley Fat Max. A drywall hanger, what he wants to do is have that tip of that tape measure to be narrow as possible. The more narrow this tip is, the more blade is exposed, easier to sink it into the drywall and make his cuts. So Fat Max to me is basically out of the business. Because what we want to do is we want to be able to go ahead and hook our tape, or hook our blade on the inside of the tape tip and expose that tip of that blade right there, right? So we can sink that in and go ahead and make our cuts. So the fatter the blade, the less blade exposed, the worse off we're going to be when it comes to cutting and trying to be accurate and straight. One of the techniques we use when we cut is we've got our T-square here, right? So our T-square allows us to go ahead and make some cuts, some square cuts on the drywall sheet. Right here I got a piece of drywall that's 4 by 8. When we cut drywall, a couple of the terms that we use, if I'm cutting lengthwise like this piece is called rip. Similar to plywood, we'd be ripping drywall, cutting rips. When I cut straight down, and I'm cutting a section of this drywall off, the narrowest part, that's called a butt, like a butt joint. The rips usually come off the factory edge, and the factory edge has the paper that runs and overlaps, goes up and over and back. Whereas the butts, they don't. It's a cut end. You can actually see the rock. So right here, this would be a factory side, right? A lot of times it does have the writing on this side, so it's factory. The paper comes around, wraps around all the way. Here's the factory side too. It's got the tape, but as you can see, when you peel the paper back like this, a little tab, you can still see the rock. You can see the gypsum right there. So what you want to do is we're cutting rips. Keep that factory side up there. We can use that as a good line, good guide when we go ahead and make our cuts. So if I'm cutting drywall, my buddy tells me, hey, I need a rip 12 inches. I'm going to grab my knife, my tape, hook my knife on the inside of the tip of my tape, pinch my tape at 12 inches, and go ahead and make this cut all the way through. Nice straight cut. I'll demonstrate it. It's the same with the pencil. If we're making a mark with our pencil, we'll do the same thing. We're going to hook the pencil to the inside of our tape. So it's hooked, it's holding. We pinch it. He says, hey, give me a 12-inch rip. I come over here, pinch it at 12 inches with the pencil line, and I can go a nice straight line. That's what we want. Now the T-square allows us to go ahead and make our butt cuts, okay? So if it's a full sheet, because this T-square is 48 inches, I could hang this on the factory side right here, and you can see that it'll line it up nice and square, and I could go ahead and make my butt cuts. Now, one of the things for drywalling is production, right? Boom, 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 get as much square footage up as you could possibly can. So typically, you're gonna use your T-square a few times on 12-foot length drywall. 8-foot length, you should be able to do the same thing that I did with the rip this way to be able to do it the opposite way, going straight down. And that's production drywall, that's speed, right? I'll demonstrate it with the pencil, same thing. If the pencil was my knife, I hook it on the inside, pinch it nice and tight at the end. If I want a 43-inch butt, I could go ahead and just come straight down. Nice straight line at 43 inches. Now one thing about the square, when we are not using this square, we always put the T part, the top, down. All right? Can't get lazy and go ahead and make our cut right here. If we're using the square, use it, then lean it like this, because if this thing falls down and it hits the sides, you know, eventually we're going to knock this out of square. Now when we talk about T-squares, just like we talked about knives and tapes, there are a lot of different kinds. What we want is a good, heavy, thick T-square. Not the cheap ones that bend real easy, that flop around, that's about 1/8 of an inch thick. No, we want the ones that are about 3/16, you know, almost a full 1/4 inch thick. Those tend to last a lot longer. And then it's the safety factors that when we use the T-square, we're always going to put our hands on top here and our foot at the bottom, and then we go ahead and we use the blade. We don't want to do this, put our hands here, and then use this knife here, because it could be real easy for us to catch this blade, come on down, and give ourselves a cut. Keep our body parts away from the dangerous end of the knife, right? So put your hand on top, pinch it right here, put your foot on the bottom, that'll hold it steady. It won't hold the tape from rocking back and forth as you're going ahead and running your blade down it. You're good to go. So that's one technique when we're talking about cutting drywall. Let's set this down right here. Top of the T down, so if it falls, no big deal. It's not going to be knocked out of square. Now, we talked about rip cuts and butt cuts, right? So a rip, we're going lengthwise, butt, we're going down. Now that being said, a lot of times on the job site, we have to go ahead and cut rips for drywall return, for window returns, door returns, any kind of return or a soffit where it requires a small rip, 3-inch, 4-inch, anything under 48 inches, right? 2 foot, 1 foot, doesn't make a difference. So the one good thing that we want to do is being productive is make sure we get all our numbers. If I'm going to go ahead and wrap all these windows along this house or apartment or building, I'm going to get all my numbers and I'm going to go ahead and cut a lot of rips. The reason being is because we want to be able to use the factory edge, right? So I'll make all my cuts first before I snap my first rip. Because if I do that, then I leave this side, a cut side, and that has all rough drywall, right? Not a good guide for my hands. It's not pleasant on my fingers when I'm running my tape measure down. So what I would do right there, if my buddy tells me, hey, or I go check myself, and I gotta go ahead and make a bunch of 4-inch rips, because I got all these windows returns to do in this building, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my knife, my tape, and I'm gonna start going 4 inches, right? 4 inches. Keep my tape every 4 feet. Notice no T-square. Nice nice and straight. Pinch the tape tight with your finger. Bring your blade on the inside. And that's what I'm doing. Just going right down, making all these rips. I don't make it. If I need 4 4-inch rips, I make it. If I need a 12-inch rip, I'll do the 4s, then I'll do the 12. But I'm going to try and utilize this nice factory edge so I can go ahead and run my tape down there nice and clean and be accurate with my cuts. Now that I did that, make a little notch on the bottom, because sometimes you don't go all the way down to the bottom, or a few inches short. So now that we got that, we can go ahead and start snapping. So when we snap our first rip, I can go ahead and snap it, bend it back. And the next tool that we'll use is the rasp. So a lot of times when we're doing returns, we may be going into a door frame, a window frame, window mullion, storefront. So drywall, when you cut this board, sometimes it could be a little bit rough. So we use the rasp or the sureform plane. You know, in the field drywall is called, it's the rasp. And we'll go ahead, bend the first 2 rips, make the rasp, making it nice and even, taking the dust out, knock it. And then before I snap this piece off, what I'll do is I'll bend, because it'll allow me to go ahead and cut that next one, right? Now I could actually make this fold right here again, rasp it, and now I got nice clean edges. It's almost like the rasp does the sanding on the side. And then on the back side, I go ahead and cut the brown side. Just nice and gently, make a nice little score, snap it off. And now I got my rip. Now one technique, once you get good at drywalling, you don't always have to back cut and double cut all these rips. Something like this, I went and go ahead and back cut it. I got 2 rips available. When you get good, you could actually whip and snap it. So, nice and easy. I didn't have to score it with my knife. I could go ahead and bring these together and whip it. And with practice and the experience, that becomes a really easy technique. And you don't have to always constantly be taking your knife out to back cut this drywall. It's one of those things that we do for production, right? It's amount of square footage. It's go, 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 hang, 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 get more drywall up on the wall or the ceilings. So that's a technique for ripping, for rasping. You don't always have to use your rasp. Sometimes if you want to keep the amount of weight on your bags, an experienced drywaller, when he does his rips, remember I had a few more made right here. I'll do the same thing, cut both of these. But what I'll do now, instead of using a rasp, if I don't have one in my bags, I could go ahead and use my keyhole saw, right? Just put my keyhole saw right up against, and just use that, just to take the big burrs out of it. Just make it a nice and smooth so it can butt up to whatever I'm putting up against it. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, you could always use your drywall hammer. Now, drywallers use a hatchet. They don't use a claw hammer. And the reason they use a hatchet is because sometimes, you know, you can wedge your hatchet in there and use that to either raise the board or wedge your board tight to get your joints nice and tight, because that's what we want. We want our joints to be nice and tight when we're hanging drywall. So you could also use your hatchet, just using the top side of it, bring it along, and you're going to take all your burrs out of it, making it nice and smooth. And then, same thing, like I said, you want to go ahead, just make a couple little knocks, snap it off. Same thing, right? I got 2 rips. All it takes is one good whip, snaps right off, and now you go ahead and start making. Now when we do window wraps, the one thing we don't do is measure all the windows. We'll go ahead and lean this rip up against one side of the window, eyeball it, cut it, snap it, break it, install it. Piece of cake. So those are ribs. We know what our rib joint is. We know what our butt joint is.